It's Apple Cup week, everybody, and we have no one better to talk about the rivalry between Washington and Washington State than quarterback Alex Brink, who won this matchup three times under center for the Cougs. Alex, before we get into the this year's matchup and break it all down, what does the Apple Cup mean to you now, still, as a broadcaster, as an alum, as somebody who's a couple decades removed from playing in this game? Just what does it mean to you now?
Well, it's super important, for a lot of reasons, right? I grew up in Eugene, Oregon. I was a part of a legendary rivalry with Oregon, Oregon State in the Civil War. Watching that, I was so fortunate to go to Washington State and then experience the Apple Cup and in all facets. People forget my redshirt year, right? That's the game we lost to Cody Pickett and big touchdown pass, who kind of kept us out of the Rose Bowl. That was, and that followed the year with Jason Gesser, where I heard all the stories about that one, and then got to participate in it for the next 4 years. And I believe strongly in the idea of the history of it and the pageantry, and I think the idea of the fan bases, the way they compete in it, the way they care about it, the split family households, like all that stuff is the best of what college football is. And I think this day and age, with the way things are changing, I think it's important that we protect those things. I think those things, are a big part of these universities in the state. And so I'm excited that they were able to kind of figure out a way to still do it, albeit in September. I think it's equally as important, and I think it's got, for these teams, it's a vital piece of their season.
Still kind of getting used to an Apple Cup where there's no threat of snow in the forecast.
Sure.
You're talking about this Cougar team, so many new faces, obviously a new coaching staff, people that aren't, familiar with this rivalry. Back when you were playing and you would have, say a freshman wide receiver from California who really never paid attention to the Apple Cup before, didn't know the history. How important that week was it for the older players, the players that had some skin in the rivalry already, to kind of introduce them like, hey, this is why this game's important more than just, of course, you want to go out and win every game?
Well, yeah, and maybe I think about it a little differently because I was a player. I was a player first, and then now being on the outside looking at it and not being a coach. Like I do think pretty strongly that you should treat it differently than other games. Like that's okay. You're not making any other game less important. You're honoring what this game is. And so, Bill Dobo, my head coach, he took that approach, right? He'd been at Washington State for a long time. A lot of our staff was former Washington State football players. So we would have guys come back and tell stories. We would have stuff posted in the locker room throughout the week. I mean, we would do a lot of that. And so naturally, the young players kind of realize, like, oh, this is a little bit different. Like, we need to treat this a little bit different. And I think, my redshirt freshman year, that senior class hadn't won the Apple Cup in something like 6 years, I think, or 5 years. And so, when we won that game, I mean, '06 or '05 and '07 were so special for a lot of reasons. But that '04 game was really, really special because that senior class, for all the great things they had done, hadn't beat the Dogs. And so, I got to see that, the look on their face, the excitement and all the things. You impress the importance of the game upon younger players and new players by telling them how important it is and showing them the history and explaining what it was and having people talk about it. And ultimately that creates an emotion around the game, and I think a focus. And I think those things are okay.
Before we get into this year's matchup between the Cougs and Huskies, I just got to ask you, and maybe this is a stupid question. Is your favorite memory of the Apple Cup the pass to Michael Bumpus? I mean, I feel like it would have to be, right?
Brandon Gibson, but yes,
Brandon Gibson,
I
excuse me,
think,
not Michael Bumpus.
yeah, no problem, no problem. Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, there's so many layers to it. Like, it was my last collegiate pass. Like, the last touchdown, and we beat the Dogs in Husky Stadium. Kind of send Bill Doba and that staff out on a winning note. Our senior class was such such an important one. We were so close. Like, I mean, I can look back at my career, and there's probably 10 plays over the course of 4 years that just we become a bowl game. We become a bowl team. We beat this. We beat number 3 USC at home. Like, there's a lot of, we were really close as a senior class to have some really special moments. And so to end on a special moment was really cool.
Absolutely. Sorry about that, Brandon Gibson. I was thinking of talking Cougs and Michael Bumpus.
So
My
it's okay.
my apologies for the.
To be fair, Michael Bumpus made probably the two most important plays on that drive: a big third down conversion, and then the very next play, a tight ball in traffic to get us even down there. So Michael does deserve a ton of the credit.
You guys can hash that out on Talking Cougs with Brink and
Sure.
Bumpus this week on Root Sports. Quick plug right there. Talking about this year's Apple Cup. Obviously, the fan base may be a little bit on edge after seeing such a lopsided loss. But if you want to talk about one way to kind of get that the bandwagon behind the Cougs this year, it could be this win. At Gesa Field. Obviously, would also be the first home win in the Apple Cup in quite some time. Just when you look at it like that, what does the team have to do? I'm guilty of it. The Apple Cup is the most important game as a Cougar alum and a Cougar fan to me every single year. But how do you not make it too big at the same time and let yourself the nerves and the weight of the moment get to you?
Well, the execution's the same, right? Like if you turn the ball over 5 times in the first half, you got no chance, right? But if you execute, one play at a time, if you tackle in space, if you do your job, if you're doing your assignments and staying assignments down, then like I think athletically and talent wise, you should be in the game, like for sure. And so, I think that's for football players, you want to be able to ride the emotion while also leaning into your preparation, right? And the work you've put in so that you fall back into that muscle memory, right? When emotion affects you is when it changes your process in a game. And so that's where you're trying to harness that emotion to ultimately make you play a little faster or be a little more focused or whatever it is. And I think that those things are okay. But I think to your point is, yes, you can get too excited. You can get too up, and too up when you lose, it makes you lose focus potentially. And so I think for these guys, it's the idea of, look, most of them have never stepped on Gesa Field with it full, 36,000 people and that place rocking and a Husky crowd that's gonna be loud and the Coug fans loud and beer being sold in the stadium. Like, I mean, they haven't experienced that, and so they're gonna have to be able to look at that and take all the good out of it and not get too high and too excited because of it.
From the Huskies, they're coming off a bye, so we only have two games of the 2025 Huskies on tape. Is there anything that you've been able to take away? Obviously, the level of competition that they've played hasn't been, typical Big Ten football for them, but just what have you seen so far from them? Obviously, they have a pretty elite playmaker at quarterback.
Yeah, just a really good football team. Jed Fish is, I think, in my opinion, he's really known for rebuilding rosters. He did it at Arizona. Like, we've seen him do it before. And so he's kind of in that mode, right? Last year wasn't great for them, but they were kind of rebuilding, getting the pieces of the puzzle together, remade the offensive line. Damon Williams is a special quarterback. You got really good backs. So offensively, it's going to be a challenge. I mean, you're going to have to be as good as we hope this defense is for Washington State every play, right? They're going to have to tackle in space. The defensive line is going to have to be great. The linebackers are going to have to find a way to make plays at or near the line of scrimmage. The Coug defense last year did that, right, against a similarly talented offense. So, I'm hopeful in that regard. And then I think offensively, you got to quickly establish what your identity is, because this, the Husky defense, they're going to play man coverage. They're going to really try and attack you up front. And so whoever's playing quarterback, however that plays out, they've got to decide from a play calling aspect, how are they going to attack that team? How are they going to keep them off balance? And what are they going to be? Because I think that's the thing they've struggled with early in the season.
Interesting to think that no matter who goes out at quarterback for the Cougs, no matter what time of the game it is, it'll be their first time playing, the Huskies. So that'll be very interesting. Talking about this Cougar offense a little bit, I'm glad you mentioned identity because Coach Rogers said in his Monday press conference, he was asked, "What's your identity?" He said, "We're trying to find one." Obviously, coach believes down to his core that you need to be able to run the football. And so far hasn't really been there consistently. Is that something against UW that you can just continue to try and establish that run? Or do you think that maybe, if the run's not there early or if the Huskies are on the board first, do you think the Cougs have to kind of let it rip and air it out with whoever's out there at quarterback?
I'm of the mindset, similarly to after the Idaho game, that you got to kind of lead with the pass. And I don't necessarily mean the downfield pass, but you got to lead with the pass to kind of stretch the field out. Think back to the San Diego State game, right? The first play was quick play action, ball out in the flat to Trey Lechner. Lechner's kind of stretching the defense. He picks up 2 or 3 yards, nothing huge, but like gets the defense running, right? And then you come back and you get an outcut to Tony Freeman, or you're getting the defense moving this way, right? And then you can attack them downhill. And I think that's how you can utilize the pass game to, in my opinion, really affect the defense. I also think, there's some playmakers for the Washington State offense in that receiver and tight end room that have played in this game, and they've played at the FBS level for a long time. Guys like Josh Meredith, Tony Freeman, Trey Lechner, they understand the speed of the game and they understand how to make plays in big moments. And I think you need to lean into that a little bit. A guy like Josh Meredith, based on his experience last year, how long he's played at this level, like he's going to know how to operate and he's going to make the plays he needs to make very consistently. And whoever the quarterback is can kind of lean into that. And so can the play caller. I think Danny Freund can lean into guys like Tony Freeman and Lechner and Josh Meredith, and that'll get that offense going. And then hopefully some of these guys that have talent but are maybe trying to find their footing, like an Angel Johnson or a Kirby Voorhees, right? We saw Maxwell Woods really involved at the running back position last week. Well, hopefully those guys, can kind of catch up because they've got the ability, right? It's just kind of getting caught up with that speed of the game, and what the expectation is.
Yeah, go to Josh Meredith. He has a track record in this game, scored what ended up being the game-winning touchdown in last year's Apple Cup.
Right.
And that's kind of my last question for you, and it's a very broad scope one. You talk about some of the greatest plays in Cougar football history. It's no doubt that a lot of them come from the Apple Cup. Bledsoe to Bobo, you to Gibson, Andrew Fernie's game-winning kick. Last year, Kyle Thornton's goal line stand. When you have a chance like that, not that Kyle Thornton or Andrew Fernie, obviously you and Bledsoe being quarterbacks, weren't already like looked upon favorably by the fan base, but when you have a chance to have a performance or make a play in this game that becomes like puts you into that Cougar legend status, do you think that the players that make those plays in the moment realize how big it was? Like, for example, last year, Kyle Thornton, somebody we know so well, from last year. Do you think when he made that play, he realized just like how big it was? Do you think when Tony Pole in the 2012 Apple Cup had that interception, do you think he realized at the time? Like, can you appreciate how big it is for an entire state? You're crushing the hopes of one side and becoming a hero to the other. Do you think you can recognize that in the moment, or does it take time?
No, I think you recognize him in the moment. I mean, I think the gravity of the situation, the lead in, again, like I said, the history of the game and all the plays you see, the reality of it is the record for Washington State against UW. Like, when you make those plays in those big moments that, you do kind of become legendary. And, for a fan base that, wants it year in and year out, kind of regardless of record, when you have that opportunity and you go make those plays like a Kyle Thornton, a guy that, was in the program so long, a team captain, like, he was made for that moment, and he stepped up and he made that play. And I think, that's the thing that's pretty special, right? And we're kind of looking for who's going to be this year's version of that or the next version of that, because there's always going to be one. There's going to be an opportunity, right? This is the type of game and the type of rivalry where there will always be that moment where somebody gets the opportunity to step up and make those plays. I'm excited for this team to see who that can be.
Well, it's going to be really exciting. We'll have all the coverage leading up to kickoff and, of course, all the way through on swxlocalsports.com. And you can hear more from Alex Brink and Michael Bumpus, not Brandon Gibson. I won't flip it around the other way either as they get ready for the Apple Cup as well on Root Sports. So, Alex, thanks so much. We'll see you Saturday and looking forward to a great Apple Cup. They always seem to, have some kind of drama and a high air of excitement around them, no matter who's on the field and what year it is.
No doubt. Go Cougs.